this morning will be from 1 John chapter 2. I like to have time to pre-read scripture before I read in front of people. Those of you that were here Wednesday night heard me make a huge blunder. I've pre-read this about 20 times, so that's no guarantee, but we'll hope we don't have a repeat of Wednesday night. I'll be reading from the New American Standard Version. My little children, I am writing these things to you that you may not sin. And if anyone sins, we have an advocate with the Father, Jesus Christ the righteous. And he himself is the propitiation for our sins, and not for ours only, but for those of the whole world. And by this we know we have come to know him, if we keep his commandments. The one who says, I have come to know him, and does not keep his commandments is a liar, and the truth is not in him. But whoever keeps his word, in him the love of God has truly been perfected. By this we know that we are in him. The one who says he abides in him ought himself to walk in the same manner as he walked.
Be seated. I hope that as we sing these songs in our worship services, not just today, but every time we assemble, whether it's Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, we really focus on the words. And what a beautiful song that was that we were led in before the lesson this morning. Oh, to be like thee. That is our cry. That's our plea. That's our aim. Got this picture. I found one. I thought, man, I would love to walk down there, walk along that path and see all the sights that are around that. It just looks really inviting and very beautiful. I'm sure that there might be some uphills and downhills and things, but it still looks very inviting, something that's very beautiful to take that journey along this path. I don't know where it's at. I just found it on the internet. But it reminds me, I was thinking about that as I was thinking about our lesson. We're on a journey. As children of God, we're on a journey as we sing the song, Oh, to be like thee, as John writes, to be like Christ in 1 John chapter 2. We think about this journey, and it is not always pretty, the journey that we're on, trying to be like Christ. You know, we have good days as children of God, days in which we have spiritual highs, those days that we look Satan in the eye and say, get behind me, Satan. Those days when temptations come our way and we just kind of shuck them off to the side and they do not affect us whatsoever. We do not succumb to those temptations, to those bad days. And we have those good days in our journey to being like Christ. We also have those difficult days, those days in which we seem to stumble and fall, when we succumb to temptation from time to time. We, like Paul, sometimes he would say in Romans that there are things that I want to do and I don't do them, and there are things that I know I shouldn't do and I do them. No, that journey that we're calling a journey to Christ-likeness is not always pretty. But regardless, we need to make sure that we're on the path of being like Christ every day, that we're doing the best that we can, and we understand that God does not expect us to be perfect, that His grace is such that all He wants us to do is to try, to do the best that we can. 1 John chapter 2 talks about knowing Christ and obeying Christ, following Him and being like Him. How do I know if I'm on track in my journey to being like Christ? Oh, to be like thee. How do I know that I'm where I need to be, I'm moving in the direction that I need to move, that I'm accomplishing the things that I need to accomplish, that I'm growing in the areas that I need to grow? We don't pass out report cards. The elders, ministers, our parents, or whoever it might be, our spouses, we don't pass out, hey, you've got this, you've done A, B, it's not too good on this area in your journey. There are no growth charts. You remember what it's like when you were young. Maybe you do that with your children, and on their birthday you go to that hall closet and you mark where they're at and where they were last year, and you see if they're growing. When it comes to Christianity, there are no growth charts that we can look at, that we've been given. There are no assessments that can be handed out that saying, yeah, you are on the path to Christ's likeness and you are further along this year than you were last year. So how do we know? Romans chapter 8, verse 29, Paul says, "For whom he foreknew, he also predestined to become conformed to the image of his Son, that he might be the firstborn among many brethren." We're to be conformed to the image of Jesus Christ. That's the journey. That's the path that we take. That's the things that we do every day. Listen to these passages. 2 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 18, Paul writes that we all, with unveiled face, beholding as in a mirror the glory of the Lord, are being transformed into the same image from glory to glory, just as from the Lord the Spirit. 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 16, he says, "Therefore we do not lose heart, but though our outer man is decaying, yet our inner man is being renewed day by day." Of course, Romans chapter 12, 1 and 2, "Therefore I urge you, brethren, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies a living and holy sacrifice, acceptable to God, which is your spiritual service of worship. And do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, so that you may prove what the will of God is, that which is good and acceptable and perfect." Transforming. It's a journey. It's something we do every day. It's a step that we take from one day to the next, trying to be more Christ-like. It's important that we are growing in those ways, being more like Christ. How do we know? What can we do? I want us to focus on 4 areas that I think we can look at in our own lives to see if I'm on the path, on the journey to being more like Christ. The first one would be the idea of speaking like Christ. People are around you and they listen to how you spoke to those around you. You spoke to your spouse, you spoke to your children, you spoke to your parents, you spoke at work, you spoke to just friends. Are you speaking like Christ? Pretty easy, pretty simple to look at this area. The idea of speaking like Christ. Are we speaking gracious words? When I think of Christ, I think of a man who spoke words of grace to those around him. Colossians chapter 4, Paul reminds us, "Let your speech always be with grace, as though seasoned with salt, so that you will know how you should respond to each person." We should talk to people, and our thoughts, our words should be filled with grace. As a matter of fact, when we think about Jesus, one of the times that we overlook, but it says of Jesus that one of the things that amazed the people that were listening to him, in Luke chapter 4, verse 20, it says, "All were speaking well of him and wondering at the gracious words which were falling from his lips." And they were saying, "Is this not Joseph's son?" What was it that amazed them? The gracious words that Jesus spoke. You know, in a world that's so very harsh and critical, in a world where there's so much conflict, I think it's important that we as Christians try to speak gracious words, kind words to those around us. Not just gracious words, but I believe we should be speaking edifying words. Jesus was someone who always was building up people. We need to be builders of people around us. We need to be lifters of those around us. It's a very burdensome world. It's a very hard world. People have enough on their plate, and we don't need to put any more on it, but rather we should be a breath of fresh air. We should be those that are lifting people up and building them up, especially on their journey to being more like Christ. We should have the ability to find the good in people, the good in life, the good in circumstances, and use that to build people up. Ephesians chapter 4, verse 29, Paul says, "Let no unwholesome word proceed from your mouth, but only such as is good for edification," for building up, according to the need of the moment, so that it will give grace to those who hear. Speak like Christ, gracious words, words that build and lift up others around you. And then unselfish words. Our society, it seems, has gotten pretty selfish. I mean, how many of us take selfies and want people to see about me and know about me? And I'm not saying there's necessarily anything wrong, but it does perhaps give a sense of the selfishness that sometimes we exhibit in our lives and others exhibit in their lives. Jesus, not so much. We could look at a lot of examples, but I think one of the greatest examples of Jesus being unselfish and thinking about others rather than himself is found in John chapter 14. You remember where he is in the upper room and he's been telling them that he's going to die, and he's had the Lord's Supper, and they're concerned about Jesus. Jesus is concerned about them. He knows what's going to happen when he is arrested and when he's taken off by the mob. And he knows what's going to happen, that they're going to scatter like a covey of quail that's been busted in the middle of a field. And that's what they do. But he's concerned about them, and he wants them to know some things that they can hang on to, that they could lean on, that they could turn to when things get harsh for them, difficult for them, frightening for them. And so instead of talking about, look, y'all should be looking after me and giving me words of encouragement and inspiration and words to stick to this that I need to do, he says to them, look, let not your heart be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you before I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you to myself, that where I am, there you may be also. So instead of asking them to focus on what he's dealing with, he knows what they're about to deal with, and he said, look, lean on these words, that if it gets dark and you're uncertain about what's going to happen next, know this, that I've gone to prepare a place for you. I'm coming back. How unselfish was that? Speak like Christ. Every day we can strive to do more and more in regards to how Jesus spoke to others. The second thing I think is important as we're on this journey to being more like Christ would be to see like Christ. By that I mean we look beyond the surface. We look beyond the external, and we really see the heart of somebody and the circumstances in which someone might be dealing with. And it changes our outlook and the way we treat people. It changes the way that Jesus treated people and others would treat the people that were around Jesus. Just think about this. In Luke chapter 7, Jesus goes to the house of Simon the Pharisee. Simon invited him to the house, and Simon doesn't wash his feet, doesn't do anything for him. In the middle of that supper, this lady comes in who was not a very nice lady as far as the community would look at her. She was an adulteress. She was a prostitute. And she comes in and she begins to weep and anoint his feet and honor him as Son of God. And Simon's like, if he knew who she was, he wouldn't have anything to do with her. But see, that's the thing. He knew exactly who she was. Exactly what she needed. Not to be ridiculed. Not to be ostracized. Not to be made fun of. John chapter 8. You remember Jesus in Jerusalem, and they bring before him the woman caught in the very act of adultery. What are you going to do with her? And Jesus stoops down, writes in the dirt, stands up, writes again, let him who is without sin, he tells him, cast the first stone, and they all leave. He saw beyond the shame that this woman was experiencing and saw her need, saw her hurt. He really saw who she was, that she was a soul. And then John chapter 4, the woman at the well shows up in the middle of the day to get water when no one else was around because she just couldn't be with others, didn't want to be with others. Remember Jesus said, yeah, I know who you are. You are not married now. You've had so many husbands, but the man you're with now, you're not married to. But then he gave her what she needed. He truly saw what she needed, and that was living water. He saw their needs. We need to be able to see the needs of people and not be so harsh and judgmental about certain circumstances and things without understanding where a person is in their lives. He saw their needs. Matthew chapter 9, verse 36. I love this passage. It says of Jesus, as seeing the people, he felt compassion for them because they were distressed and dispirited like sheep without a shepherd. That's a word that a lot of people don't understand, compassion. Jesus saw what they needed and felt compassion. He also saw what was truly valuable. Matthew 6:19 through 21, Jesus says, "Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal, but store up for yourselves treasures in heaven where neither moth nor rust can destroy and where thieves cannot break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." He could see really what true treasure is. We need to see that too. Luke 12:15, he tells them, "Beware and be on guard against every form of greed, for not even when one has an abundance does his life consist of his possessions." Truly see what's important in others and what's important in life. See like Christ on this journey to Christ likeness. We can love like Christ every day in this journey that we're on. To be like him, we need to love like Christ. One of the things that we can do is be sacrificial. When you think about Christ's love, you think about it being sacrificial. John 15:12 and 13, he says, "This is my command, that you love one another just as I have loved you. Greater love is no man than this, than one lay down his life for his friends." Sacrifice. And then selfless. Philippians chapter 2, Paul writes that Jesus, although being in the form of and equal with God, did not hold on to God, did not count himself as equal with God, but he emptied himself and took on the form of a bond servant. It was selfless, not selfish. He was concerned about others and shared that love for others and willing to give up even heaven to come to this earth. And then finally, the fourth area in our journey to be more like Christ, we can serve more like Christ. That's who Jesus was. Jesus came to serve. He says in Mark 10:45 that even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but rather to serve and give his life a ransom for many. Our lives should be filled with service. When we think about Jesus and his service, he served when it was convenient. Served those who were near and dear to him, Lazarus and Mary and Martha and the apostles. He served them. But he also served when it was inconvenient, when it was hard, when it was something that wouldn't seem right. Let me see. I really messed it up. We think about it being convenient, inconvenient. For example, in John 13, Jesus is in the upper room. We're back again to that upper room, and there he is washing the disciples' feet, the apostles' feet. No one else was willing to do that. No one else was willing to serve one another. And Jesus said, "I'm going to show you something." He girded the towel around his waist and sat down and started washing the feet of the apostles, including the one who was going to betray him in just a few hours. Washed his feet. He served when it was convenient, when it's inconvenient. We need to serve when it's easy. When we're serving those who are friends, when we're serving those who are members of our church family, when we're serving our neighbors, and that's what we want to do. We need to serve when it's convenient. But if we're going to be like Christ, it means we're also serving others when it's inconvenient, when it's unpopular, when we're serving someone that might not really like us and might not really appreciate it. Serving when it might be awkward and difficult. But that's like Christ. That's striving to be like him. Jesus never said it would be easy. As a matter of fact, he made sure that all his followers knew to follow me and to be like me is going to be difficult. It's going to be hard. He would tell them, you need to count the cost before you start following me. He would remind them the foxes have holes in the ground, the birds have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. He would tell them, in this world you will have tribulation. If you're going to be like me, you're going to experience these things. And even in the limited commission, he sent those to preach the good news. And he said, don't take anything with you. Don't take any money from anyone. It's not going to be easy. And it's not easy, this journey to be more like Christ. It is a long, arduous journey. You know what the longest trail in the world is? You might think it might be in Europe, where they walked everywhere, or in South America or Central America, but the longest trail in the world is the Appalachian Trail. Starts in Maine, it goes all the way down to Georgia. 2,190 miles long. That's a trail. It's estimated it takes 5 million steps to complete the Appalachian Trail. It takes about 5 to 6 months for people to do it. Those that try, they start and they say, look, you're supposed to do it in the spring about three months and then finish in the fall because you don't want to do it during the summer. It's estimated some 3,000 people travel and start this Appalachian Trail with the intent to walk it. But only 1/3 eventually finish it. It might be several years before they do, but they only 1/3 eventually finish the trail from start to finish. There are signs along the trail that talk about, look, be aware. You understand this is dangerous. You need to be well prepared to do these things. You need to watch out for this. This is extra difficult. They tell them those things because they want to make sure that they're ready to walk this trail that's difficult and challenging and dangerous. Not only that, but there are things that can bring great harm, maybe even death, on the Appalachian Trail. There are signs from, hey, you might get a tick and it might infect you and it could kill you. To, there are bears. If you're not careful, bears can come around and get you. Not only that, but they say in some of these areas, I guess some of these Civil War states, that there are unexploded ordnances that you might find. And you need to stay away from them because they could explode and they could kill you. That's the Appalachian Trail. It's dangerous, but it's not impossible. And there are those that have accomplished. And they say the joy is found in the journey. You know, the journey to Christ's likeness is difficult. Jesus handed out the warnings. And Jesus said there are things that can really get you. Whether it's a roaring lion or some other type of temptation, it can get to you. It's difficult, this journey to being like Christ. It's something that we do every day, and we have to choose every day to stay on the path to being more like Christ. It involves doing hard things. It involves sacrifice. It involves effort. It involves focus. It involves not taking the easy way. We need to make sure that we understand that being like Christ is a journey. It's a process. We never get there. I've got down not a destination. You know, we don't finish this trail, this journey of Christ's likeness until we're finished. You know what I mean. Christ comes or we experience death. But there's great joy in this journey of being like Christ, of growing closer to God, of fulfilling His commands and blessing those around us and blessing even ourselves. This journey that we call Christ-likeness. Where are you at in regards to how you talk, how you see, how you love, how you serve? We're going to offer an invitation at this time, and if we can help you in any way, we encourage you to come now as we stand and as we sing.